All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim and her pushing his gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon all your houses. This is Brother Quanah Watts from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. When I just came, across this article, because, a lot of people, are mainly focused right on this government shutdown and, ultimately the canceling of, these different government aid programs, right, such as SNAP, WIC, Section 8 housing or HUD, right, urban housing development. Everybody's focused on that, right, and you see a lot of, videos coming out about these average citizens just basically tripping, man. But while everybody is, focused on this shutdown and, what is to come, right? Which we hope and we pray, that this shutdown and the removal of these different programs, right, ultimately holds, But again, meanwhile, right, while everybody's focused, on these different programs being removed, right, Esau's making moves in the background, right, as he always does, man, And again, I came across this article, originally on, I think it was Natural News, but I ended up clicking it, on the article, man, and, diving in a little bit and found this one, right? It's on the Discern report. It says Palantir and Nvidia team up to give the globalist surveillance state a huge upgrade. So this is a huge move, right? With these two, tech giants, if you will, basically coming together. This is a huge move, right? That ultimately plays into, the fulfillment, right, of the prophecy of Revelations 13 and verse 16, man, which is the mandatory implementation of the RFID micro C-HIP, which is soon to come, right? All these different, countries, right? Mexico, the UK, ultimately forcing, their citizens to, get, a digital ID, which is only a step in the direction of, right, receiving the actual RFID micro C-HIP, which is a little rice grain, little brain C-HIP, the one that, Elon Musk is putting in these different patients in these hospitals, right, in the step of the direction of making that mandatory, right, for every U.S. citizen, or every citizen, or every person, right, in the world, right, because again, this is something that's ultimately going to touch the world. It's not just going to touch, right, in these different countries and not hit America, it's going to touch everywhere, right? Worldwide, the RFID micro C-HIP is going to be made mandatory, and it is going to hit here in America, man. Right now, they just came out and said that, to get on to the, these different flights and whatnot, if you're a foreign citizen, or if you're foreign, you're not, a non-citizen of America, right? You're being forced, to ultimately have, a digital ID, right, and succumb to these biometric, verification, so that's hitting here now, right? And soon it's going to be, American citizens, man, are going to have to have, a digital ID or give up their biometric, data, which is, your retina scans. They have something called the vascular or vein identifier, where they scan your veins, again, as well as your fingerprint, your face, so on and so forth, man, which are all steps, right, in the direction of, again, the fulfillment of Revelations 13 and verse 16, So without further ado, Salaki for the long introduction, we're going to get into this article, and again, just ultimately, see how this is going to, play out in the fulfillment of Revelations 13 and 16, man. You know, because again, this is a step in that direction as well, right? This says Palantir. This is on the, again, discernreport.com. Palantir and Nvidia team up to give the global surveillance state a huge upgrade, right? It says the merger between C-hip titan Nvidia and data mining powerhouse Palantir represents far more than a business partnership, right? Because again, when we look at Palantir, Palantir is used, right? This is current, right? Is used to basically, survey, the masses, right? And this is something that's being used, right, all over the world already, and it was being used during, and you can look it up, right? This is information you can look it up, ultimately, take on the spirit of the Church of Berea, right? And look these things up, man, right? Which is, what our elder apostles ultimately command us to do, man. They push that, right? To be like the Church of Berea, right? When Apostle Paul ultimately spoke, spoke things to them, or, was teaching them, they would go look those things up for themselves, right? So ultimately go and look this up, right? Palantir has been used, during the scamdemic, I think it's being used in China, and it's used in military operations and whatnot. And now they're going to make it mainstream use, for, the public, right? The average citizens, right? And then what it does is it gathers data, it gathers data, which is why we've seen recently there was a data grab or a data share, period, man, where all these, especially when it came to, healthcare with RFK Jr., right, basically saying that they want to be able to make information, people's health information to be, shared from, your smartwatches to your doctor and so on and so forth, right? All these different apps and whatnot, right, for your doctor to be able to have, access to all that information by the push of a button, and then again, right, being partnered, right, Palantir, right, being partnered with Nvidia, which makes C-hips, man, So this is huge, man. This is huge information, right? This is huge, step, right, being made, right? It's the next great leap forward for the global surveillance architecture, a digital nervous system capable of tracking, predicting, and influencing nearly every aspect of modern life. And their latest endeavor is a harbinger, right? Because really, at the end of the day, Rand, it's all about control, right? And this ultimately is what will give them that ability, right? To be able to monitor, to track, to be able to look up all the data on whoever has, the C-hip, and link it to these different, systems, right? The POS systems, right? In order for you to be able to buy, right? They're going to link your digital wallet, right? They're going to link your healthcare or your health information. All this data, right, that Palantir is capable of, ultimately gathering, right, is going to be put on these C-hips that Nvidia is going to be making, as well as these different, biometric, companies, right, such as Neuralink and whatnot. All the information is going to be put on those C-hips, man. It says on paper the two companies are collaborating to create an integrated technology stack for operational AI, right? In reality, this is the fusion of the world's most powerful hardware with one of the most intrusive software ecosystems ever designed, which is speaking about Palantir, right? It says NVIDIA's GPU-driven supercomputer infrastructure will now integrate directly with Palantir's ontology, which when you look up that word ontology, right, let's go ahead and look up that word. It basically goes back into the study of being, right, the study of existence, right? It says the metaphysical science, right, which when you look up the metaphysical science, it's a study of existence, right, which Esau is, Palantir is capable of doing that through what? Gathering up all this data, and they can ultimately, be able to understand or to, to guess or to, what is that word I'm looking for, man? Estimate, right, what people are going to be doing, how they're going to be moving, different characteristics and so on and so forth, right? This is how Esau is able to do it, by gathering up all this data, right? By gathering up all this data on people, right? on animals and so on and so forth, right? Esau is using that, right? His different satellites, watching the animal patterns and so on and so forth. Esau is able to do this. And it goes back to Esau wanting to be the Most High, right? Wanting to have that control, you know, which I do. Before we continue on, I want to grab this in 2 Thessalonians 2 and 4 in the NLT. It says, he will exalt himself and defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. And we've been seeing that through, the World Economic Forum and the heads of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, as well as, the little Yuval Noah Harari, man, which ultimately made the statement that, God is dead, right? We're just trying to figure out how to hide the body, and that we don't need God, and and that that they're the new gods, and the new God of the earth, and so on and so forth, man. Right? So all this crazy ass talk, man, on the Most High, which, hey, they're gonna have to pay for that, man. The Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is not gonna acquit the wicked, man. All this bullshit that they saying, hey, the Lord finna test their chin, man. But nonetheless, right, again, he's talking like that because he wants to set himself up as the Most High. As it says right here, it says he will even sit in the temple of the Most High, claiming that he himself is God. So it's all about, setting himself up as the Most High, which is why, again, he's putting these two together, a chip giant and a data giant, right? And then merging them together, which is beautiful, right? Call Lord Yahweh Shem El Shah, man. This is all working, right, according to prophecy, Let's go back, right? It says, in reality, right? Getting back to, right here, right? It says, in reality, this is the, no, sluck it. We're right here in ontology, right? It says Palantir's ontology, right? The framework that connects massive data sets from governments, corporations, healthcare systems, and financial institutions into a single unified analytical grid, right? Into one. It's putting everything into one, right? That C-HIP, man, right? When you're combining all this information, right, and putting it on a C-HIP, now they can give that C-HIP out, right? And it will have everybody's information on it, right? Which is what we're waiting for, right? It says Palantir, originally funded by the CIA's venture arm, In-Q-Tel, built its empire on data fusion. Its software underpins intelligence gathering for the Pentagon, the NSA, and numerous law enforcement agencies worldwide. Nvidia, meanwhile, holds the keys to the computational horsepower that makes AI possible. Together, they're creating what could be described as a living digital organism, a constantly learning, constantly adapting system with the ability to analyze and act upon vast streams of information in real time. So this is ultimately, again, going to open up the door for, this, let me step out the car, it's getting a little warm. Open up the door for, robots as well, man. The use of robots, right? These robots, basically these drones and whatnot, basically acting autonomously, right? Doing Esau's bidding, right? And we understand that, Esau, and especially, Chat GPT, the AI and whatnot, right? Esau has installed, right, his own, algorithms or way of thought, into these different, robots, which is ultimately going to be, gonna aid in that, that Jacob's trouble, right? You putting the robots out here, and they're gonna automatically think Jake is a damn villain, right? Because Esau is painting, Jake, right, the so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans as the criminals and villains, right, of the earth, right? So they're gonna automatically have, those algorithms set within themselves, right? Those different standards and tasks and whatnot that are ultimately against Jake. This is gonna open up the door for that, man. It says, according to their joint announcement of NVIDIA's GTC conference in Washington, D.C., the partnership aims to accelerate and optimize complex enterprise and government systems, right? So they're going to be using this within the government, man, right? They're going to be using this federally. They're going to be using this within the states, they're going to be using it. If you want to get onto a plane or anything like that, you're going to have right? Or be a part of this system, right? They want to be able to identify you. They want to be able to track you. They want to be able to see where you're going, when you're coming back, you know? This is how you're going to be able to continue to get, you know, your food stamps, or, you know, your Section 8, you know, is if you're a part of this system, and they can ultimately track, you know, everything that you do if you're going to work, right? Because again, they're setting standards, right, for you to be able to receive, you know, food stamps, right? You got to work 80 hours, or, you know, so on and so forth. They're going to be able to track to see if you're still doing that, right? And if you're not doing that, well, guess what? Your housing, right? Your housing, your aid, right, is going to be, you know, taken away from you, man, right? This just makes it easier for them to do that, right? And as it says accelerate, right? And we know that they've been accelerating, pushing this agenda faster than ever. You know, so you best believe that they're going to push it even faster, right? Because the scriptures say in Revelation 12:12, right, that he knoweth that he hath but a short time, right? So Esau's been, you know, hustling, man, for real, right? It says that may sound benign until you realize what enterprise and government systems actually entail, which the scriptures say, right, 2 Corinthians 2:11, that we're not ignorant of Satan's devices, right? We're not ignorant of his evil schemes and plots and whatnot. We understand why they're ultimately making the statements, right? Enterprise and government systems, right? Because it's all about, again, having everybody connected to the IoT, right? The Internet of Things, right? So that way, again, he can track, trace, and monitor everyone's actions, right? Esau even wants to be able to, control your dreams, man. You know? It says these are the networks that manage critical infrastructure, financial markets, healthcare databases, military logistics, and even transportation control systems, right? Palantir's AI platform, which already serves intelligence agencies and major corporations. So see here, Palantir is being used right now, right? Being used right now. And we understand that, you know, even when ICE was rolling up on these farmers, they were apprehending them and scanning their faces, probably putting bracelets on them. You know, all this is information you can look up. This is something that the prophets have been seeing and blowing the trumpet on, man. Blowing the trumpet, you know, on all this information as we're called to do, right? Ezekiel 3:17, right? To warn the people, right, from the Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahshua, these things are coming to pass, right? The Isaiah 42:9, I've been bringing it out a lot. The Lord said what? Before it springs forth, I tell you of them. And the Lord has his prophets out here telling you and warning you of these things that are about to happen, right, and take place, right? It says Palantir's AI platform, which already serves intelligence agencies and major corporations, will now be supercharged by Nvidia's GPU accelerated computing and open AI models. Together, they promise context-aware reasoning and domain-specific automations. In simpler terms, this means decision-making power once reserved for humans will be handed to autonomous digital agents, right? AI programs that interpret, prioritize, and execute actions based on massive data feeds, which again, right, it's going to ultimately basically be, you know, Esau's executioner, if you will. You know, whoever Esau determines, right, he's going to put his algorithms in and say, hey, if they're doing this, or they think like this, or they're posting this, or whatnot, hey, cut them off completely, you know, because that's what it's about, right? That if you're not ultimately a part of this new system, right, or you're not with this new system, you're going to be cut off, right? Let's go ahead and grab that, you know, since we're speaking on it. I want to grab that in Revelation 13 and verse 16, right? And I'll read in the NLT. It says he required everyone, right? So he's requiring, right? So again, we're at the point where they're already starting to force the masses to do, to ultimately take their digital ID, right? Over in the UK, over here on the West, right, in Mexico, and then again here in America, they're now forcing non-citizens, right, to ultimately succumb to giving up their biometric information, right, biometric data, you know. So it's already starting, right? We're already here, right? But it's only going to continue to get worse, right? They're going to ultimately make it to where you have to have the RFID micro C hip, right? The thing that they're ultimately putting inside you, right? In order for you to participate in society, right? It says small and great, rich and poor, free or enslaved, to be given a mark on their right hand or in their or on their foreheads, which it's in, right? Not on, but in. You know, it's not no damn barcode or anything like that, man. It's an actual, when you go into the word mark, it goes back to the Greek word charagma, right? Which ultimately goes back to something that's, you know, imprinted mark, right? Something that's inside you, you know? One of the root word, right, is karax, which means palisade, right? Which is like a stake, right? Something that's like a big needle, which is going to be the object in which they insert the device inside you, right? A big ass needle. They show you. They've been doing it at tattoo parlors, you know, so on and so forth, man. You know, and then you got the other root word, grapho, which is going to be the information, right? That is ultimately going to be attached to that, you know, C hip, right? Which is where Palantir comes in, right? With all that data. Right, Nvidia is going to make the C hip, and Palantir is going to be the data, right, that's going to be on it. You know, it says what? Verse 17, and no one could buy or sell anything without that mark, which was either the name of the beast or the number representing his name, which is not, right. The mark is the charagma, which is the RFID micro C hip. You know, so you're not gonna be able to participate in society unless you have that, and that's what it's saying, right? I like how it states it, you know, in that 17th verse in the KJV better, right? Because that was ultimately a little off. But verse 17, it says, and that no man might buy or sell. No one is going to be able to buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. You know, so you're not going to be able to participate in society without it, right? So let's go back. It says, what kind of actions? Or it says, what kind of actions? That's the billion-dollar question. In a corporate environment, it might mean optimizing supply chains. In a defense or government setting, it could mean tracking individuals, predicting civil unrest, or deploying automated surveillance drones. With 6G data speeds on the horizon and every smart device acting as a sensor, the infrastructure for total observation is nearly complete, right? We're nearly at the point where Esau is saying, fuck it, we got what we need. Force the charagma, put the people in a position to where they need the charagma. And this whole situation with the government shutdown, right, ultimately might be, right, a catalyst, if you will, for him to sit there and say, hey, you know, well, if you want to be able to keep those things, take this, right? This is a Republican ran program, right? You want to be able to participate, you want to be able to have these different things. We're going to close down, right, that Democratic run program, right? Democratic funded program, that left funded program, but we're going to offer you a similar program, right? But it requires this, right? You want something and you got to give something up. And that's ultimately what, you know, how Esau works, man. You know, that's how this damn devil works, man. You know, he'll sit there and give you something for so long, let you get hooked on it, and then pull it from you and say, well, you want it back? You got to do this. You know, we've seen it time and time again, man. Time and time again. Just like with the JAB, right? The Icky Vicky, the C19. You know, oh, well, you wanna be able to get back to society. Hey, well, you got to take this JAB. You know, you want to still have a JOB, you got to take the JAB. You know what I mean? So it's like this damn devil does that shit, man. You know, come to find out that he was doing nothing but what? Lying. And this is exactly what this is, man. Right? Because he's going to come with this, oh, you know, it's going to make life more convenient. It's going to make life better, right? You're going to have all your information, right, put into one little device, which, you know, it's got your, you know, you got your phone, right? Because eventually they're going to come out with these different, you know, phone, like Total Recall. He had that phone in his hand, you know, which was a C-hip in his hand, you know? So eventually they're going to come out with the phone. They got the glasses, right? A blind lady was able to, you know, basically, you know, see, if you will, right? Asking, you know, the glasses, what, you know, what's in front of her, and they were describing it for her. You know what I mean? So eventually this technology is going to come out to where you're going to have your phone in your hand. You're going to have all this information. It's going to be on you. I mean, in you, you know? So they're going to play on that. Oh, well, you won't have to lose this. You won't have to lose that. You know? It's going to have all your information. You don't have to keep carrying all these different cards and purses and this, that, and the third. You know, and people are going to eat that shit up, man. You know, because people are fucking simple, right? It says, and we'll read the next 2 paragraphs, and then, you know, we'll grab a couple precepts, man, and get out of here. But it says, the technocratic dream, real-time command of everything. Woo-hoo-hoo. Real-time command of everything. That's what it boils down to, man. You know, real-time command, control over everything. That's the whole point. That's a heavy little title right there, man. Right? It says the partnership effectively creates the central nervous system of what global planners call integrated AI infrastructure. It's the foundation for the so-called smart world, smart cities, smart grids, smart transportation, and even smart governance. Each node in that system feeds data into Palantir's ontology, where it's processed by Nvidia's AI computing engines. In practice, this allows for real-time monitoring of economic flows, energy consumption, which, you know, over there in the UK, they're putting actual, you know, carbon cost, if you will, on, you know, products, man. Well, you know, you bought this, and this is how much carbon that you're using if you eat that, right? So every time that you go buy something, it's tallying up, you know, your carbon usage, man. You know, and they're coming to a time where they're going to say, hey, you use too much carbon, you can't buy no more food. You know, which Klaus Schwab, you know, ultimately presented MasterCard, right? And MasterCard was ultimately coming out. I think it was MasterCard. No, it was Visa, Slovakia. No, it was MasterCard, Slovakia. It was MasterCard coming out with a carbon tracker, right? Every time that you slid your card, it would track your carbon, you know, your what is that? You know, it would track your carbon. Damn, what am I thinking of, man? Drawing a freaking blank. You know, but nonetheless, it would track you. You know, each thing that you buy will be labeled or numbered, right? A certain amount of carbons, and again, they would track how much carbon you're putting out into the environment. You know, and they would limit you. You know, which goes back to the all, you know, command of everything, right? They want to be able to command, you know, how much you eat, what you eat, when you eat. You know, it says to the public, this may sound like progress. To those who understand the technocratic playbook, right? Because we're under a technocracy, right? Which, when you look at the word technocracy, it basically goes into a government being ruled, you know, by tech giants, if you will, you know, tech experts, right? It says it's the framework of digital control. Every innovation in operational AI brings humanity closer to a world where the system doesn't just observe behavior, it anticipates and shapes it, right? Again, control, right? That's what it's about, man. You know, it's about having the full control over the masses. You know, so we understand what's going on, man. We understand that this is leading in the direction of the fulfillment of the Revelations, the 13th chapter, right? The 16th verse on down. Really, the whole chapter, right? Really from the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th verse, you know? You know, but we're in these times, man. You know, but I'll go ahead and end it off. It's like, yeah. With this in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 3, it says, for the vision, right? When you look up that word vision, it goes back to the word prophecy, right? It's in the Hebrew, right? It says, for the vision or the prophecy is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, and it's speaking, you know? Speaking by the different legislation, by the different laws and bills and policies, right, that are being put forth, as well as, again, right, these different, you know, moves that are being made, right, that aren't necessarily policy or bill. Right, with Nvidia and Palantir coming together, right? That's another step in the direction of, again, that prophecy coming to pass, man. Right? It says, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry, man. And it's coming, and it's happening, right? In this time, You know, so you better hurry up and get right with Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua before this pops off, man. Right? Because when this RFID micro SIP is made mandatory, again, if you don't have it, you're going to be asked out. And if you don't have Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, hey, well, guess what, man? Judgment. You know, that's great judgment, man. I mean, you're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to be able to drink. You're not going to be able to go to the store. You're not going to be able to buy anything. You're not going to be able to work. You're not going to have nothing. You know? So we're in these times, man. Repent or die. You know, that's the bottom line. You know, but that's all I got. I just want to ultimately speak on that, man. You know, bring that out. You know, Lord will is edifying. You know, Lord will is informative. I want to give all praise and glory to Yahweh. Ba'Hashem Yahushua, Ba'Hashem, Rachak, Wadash, that belongs to the other apostles, the other bishops of the Great Millstone. Till next time I say Shalom.